My name is Meier. I'm the scroll saw chair for Gwinnett Woodworkers. Today I'm trying to do what's called in the beginning. You just got a scroll saw, or you've had a scroll saw for 10 years or 12 years, but it's got about an inch of dust on it and it's in the corner of your shop. What we're going to try today is get it out of that corner of the shop, or get that new one you bought and know how to use it and how to use it correctly. But remember, we got to start out. Back in the 1860s, they started out with scroll saws. Prior to that, what they used is something like this. And this is not an old one. Old ones would have been out of nice wood, whatever. But that's basically the same blade that's on that we'll discuss about blades later on. It's basically a saw. But that's what they did, and they did it by hand. And because of the large throat here, they were able to get into their piece, into a large size piece. If they had to go in, say if they had to go in a long ways, they could get in a long ways and get that cut. And then from there on, what they did is they basically had scroll saws. Well, their first scroll saws were probably maybe operated with a treadle. They may have been operated with foot pedals. But all it was is basically taking the blade and taking that blade up and down, which is the motion of a scroll saw. Then they started putting on motors and different things. Today, we'll be doing most of our presentation on this saw, which is a Delta saw, but it really is a DeWalt saw painted black and silver. Everything else is identically the same, and this is the saw we'll be using for our presentation today. It's a great saw. To me, it's not the high-end saw, it's not a low-end saw, but it's kind of in the middle of the road, and it does everything you need, and it doesn't have the vibration. You also know that in this case, I don't have the table level, okay? The table being level makes it very difficult on your shoulders when you're trying to cut. You have to bend over this way to see. But because I've got a tilt, by raising the back leg, that gives me tilt on my table, but I'm still 90 degrees to the table. And I'm going to show you how we can maybe check that to make sure we are 90 degrees to the table. One of those ways is, and everybody's going to say, well, you could bring a level and put it on. If it's level, it's going to be 90 degrees, right? Your floor may be off, and this level is not going to tell me what I want to know about that blade. This is I just threw this in. The level's not going to help you at all. What you need are a couple things. You could use something like this, and you could put it in here and go against the blade and see that there's no light between the blade and the side of this, and I can feel comfortable that it's pretty much level, okay? You can use something like that. Here's another one you could use. This one's a little tougher because it's taller. It's hard to get in. But you can maybe do it that way. But see, it's a little bit tough. But in this one, you could use it this way. Even though it's short, you could use it that way. If we have any kind of board in the shop, you can pick it out for your scrap pile or whatever. You can use this board to check and see if you're 90 degrees. What you do, turn your saw on, take your saw blade, go in about a half an inch, come back out, stop the saw, take the board, turn it, and if your blade goes back in like this, you can see it. Now if he brings the camera over here a little bit, or I'll just kind of move the saw around here a little bit, you can see how that goes back right in like that. Now, there's one more thing we can do on that to make sure we are. Why don't we do this? What we'll do is we'll come in here, and we'll come in here, what I'm going to do is cut a little circle. Now, look. We must not be exactly, because look what happened. So that could be two things. Either our blade is not straight, or my board may not be flat. And if you look, my board has a considerable bow in it. So that was the problem. The board itself is crooked. It's not flat. But if we take something that's flat, I'll just take this piece of plywood which is flat, and we come over here. What I'm going to do is cut a circle out of here, and if it's if we've got the blade set at true 90 degrees, the circle should go through, it should come up, shouldn't be any different. Comes through that way. If I could, comes that way, it'll come out that way. So that way we know our blade's 90 degrees. Now we're going to talk about the hole in your saw. If you're sawing real small stuff, it becomes a problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to make zero clearance. There's a number of ways to do it. Number one, you could take blue tape. We could take a couple pieces of blue tape. We could put a piece of blue tape on this side of the blade. We could take a piece of blue tape and put it on this side of the blade. In theory, we've got zero clearance. So now we have zero clearance and the little pieces won't fall through. That's one way to do it. Another way you can do it is you can take a playing card. Playing cards of any denomination, fours will work just as well as queens or aces, whatever you want. You take the card, and what you do is turn on your saw, come into your card, stop. You could drill a hole if you wanted to, but it's just as easy to cut. And then you put a tape here and tape here. Remember, yeah, you've got a little edge here, but remember the parts you're sawing are all small, and what you're trying to do is keep it from going through the hole. So that's another way. And then another way is great. You've probably got these all over your refrigerator at home. They're magnets. What you want to do is put the magnet side is here, non-magnet side here. Take the non-magnet side, turn it over like this. Do the same thing. You're going to saw into it, turn the saw off, take the magnet like this, and put it in, and it's down, and now you got zero clearance. Now, granted, this only works if your top is metal. If it's aluminum, you're going to have to use the tape or this card, but that's another way. Now, if you're really doing a lot of stuff that's small, you could do something, you could make something like this. What I basically did is took this, I took the board and I put it on the saw like this. Then I clamped it down. Then I went underneath here. And drew a line right where the table was, all the way around. Took it off, and I cut this out. So now I've got effectively it looks like a toilet seat, but that's what I've got. Okay, then what I did is came over and I put a piece of thin plywood, and you want it thin because remember, anything I put on top of this table, I'm losing my thickness that I can cut. I can basically cut 2 inches now. I'm now narrowed it down to 1 3/4. And the way this is made, and you can make it for any saw. This is not made for this saw, but it should fit on this saw perfectly. And it should fit flat on there and it'll be done. And that's another way of doing it. And that gives me zero clearance. And I put screws here all the way around, so that way when this gets all chewed up or eaten up or whatever, then what I do is take the screws out, put another one on, and trim it to make it work. So that's zero clearance, a number of ways. Now what we're going to do is, to do a scroll saw, most of the time you're going to have some kind of pattern you're going to use. I just randomly picked these patterns up right now. So this one right here has been attached to a 1/4 inch piece of oak that was resawed or whatever. And then what I'm going to do, here's my patterns. Now, there's a couple ways of doing it. If I were to take this, put it on here, what this is staples through a board. What that does is raises it up, and then I could use spray adhesive, and I could spray on this board, and then I would have my pattern to attach. The problem I have is if I spray on this naked wood like this, what happens is then, when you take the pattern off, you've got a lot of sanding to do to get that glue that's got impregnated in the wood on there. So what I like to do is cover that wood with, you can use packing tape or whatever you use. But in this case, I just use blue tape. this way, with it being covered, if I were to pre-sand that, now I've got that, now it's sanded. This is one method to do it. This is probably most people use it. You use a board like this, then you can take your spray and you can physically go like that, spray that, and then because you have the nails up, your pattern is held up, and you do the same thing to the pattern. Okay? Now we wait just a minute or so, and then what we can do is take this and we can stick our pattern to that board. That's one method of doing it. Now, I don't like this method, but that's just me personally, because after a while, no matter how well you do it, what you sprayed in, whatever, it's always all over your shop. The method I use is a little bit different. What I'll do is take my pattern, I turn it upside down, I use what's called, everybody has it around the house, called rubber cement. That's the way I learned how to do it. So what I do is put my pattern down on the board, which I'm going to put it on. That gives me a check to make sure that my pattern actually fits on that board. Then I take it and get it. So then I set it on the side. Then I come over, finish gluing my board like that. Let them set for probably 60 seconds or so. We'll do it a little bit fast. But see, then I take this, and what I have now is I've created contact paper. So that's another way of doing it. Now, there's another way. This came out, I haven't used it that much. This is double-sided tape. And what it does, and we'll put one on here. We'll try to get some. I'll probably have to use more than I would, but when we demo here, we'll just do it. And what this is, it comes in rolls. It's 8.5 inches wide. And what you do, don't have to use the blue tape, because what you can do is take this, physically put it down. Okay, I'm just going to use my scissors because I don't have anything else. This is being very wasteful for me with this stuff right here. That'll take care of it. Okay, now, since I got that on there, what you've got is the one side is gluey, the one side is sticky, and now when I peel it back, I basically have a very clear piece. Okay? Which you say, well, what difference does that make? Well, that's very handy if you're doing a lot of intarsia or whatever, and you want to place your pattern in a certain grain direction or whatever it is. And so what we do is we'll take that, and now since it's like this, we can just take it and lay our pattern right on there. So that's another way to do it. Two more ways that you can get a pattern on the wood. One is if you get what's called full-size labels. This particular one, they come 8.5 by 11. They're full-size labels. There's no seams or whatever. And then what you can do, and I like to use it particularly when I'm doing small things. What I do is I copy them on there, and then I don't have to get the glue out or the spray adhesive or whatever else. And what you do then is cut them out. And in this case, I'm going to cut this one out. We're going to place it right here. So what I'm going to do is take my knife. These are a little bit easier because you just peel into them. And that gives you an edge, which you separate. I got adhesive there, and all I'm going to do, in this case, I'm going to place it, and I'm going to place it right there, and paste it down, and it's down. So that's another way of adhering your pattern to the wood. Now, another way you could do it, it's the way they did a long time ago, and everybody did, and if you can find it, it's called carbon paper. Okay? So what you can do is we can put the carbon paper on our wood. Let's say this is going to be our design right here. We'll just pretend it's going to be right here. We could take this down here. I take a pencil or some pointed tool, and what we're going to do is just trace around it like this. And this is a way they used to use a lot before to get a pattern on. And remember, a pattern is only a suggested cutting thing. And that holds true for most things, except if you're doing intarsia, then you need to be exact so the pieces go back together. And we'll talk a little bit more about intarsia and just regular fretwork and those type things in a little bit. But here we are. So I've traced it all the way around. Now if I lift the carbon paper up, you'll see where my sketch is there. Sometimes that's good too, because if you notice, this carbon paper has a blue tinge to it. So therefore, when I'm cutting and I'm against the black blade, the blue will make it easier to see the lines. Everything I've done so far has been on flat. Well, my favorite is three-dimensional. I don't have the patterns here, but I did it. And what I basically did here is this is some of the label stock. And what I'm doing is a true three-dimensional. What I'm doing is this is if I was looking at you, this is what I see. If I turned you 90 degrees and looked at your shoulder, that's what I see. If I put one on one side of the wood, or one on one plane of the wood, and put the other on the other plane of the wood, I now end up with, when I cut it, I'll end up with a three-dimensional. Now, I put this on with the 8.5 by 11 label stock. But because it's a hardwood, or harder wood, what I like to use is just generic packing tape. And you say, well, okay, does that mean my label? Does that mean that label stock is not going to stay on? Well, that's not my problem. The problem is that by putting packing tape on there, what I'm doing is really putting a method to allow the blade, every time it goes up and down, to be lubricated. So what I'm doing is lubricating the blade. So by putting that tape on there, that's what I've done. So now when I go through here, every time the blade goes up and down, it lubricates, and so it makes cutting thicker stock and also harder stock much easier to do. And you don't need to put blue tape on your wood if you're doing 3D. The reason why: you don't have to put tape on it even if you're going to spray on it. Because even if the wood gets impregnated with the spray, you're cutting it off anyway. It's scrap. It's on the outside, because what I want is the center of this wood, which is going to be a three-dimensional object. From time to time, your patterns may, an end comes up or whatever it is. If you have that problem, what you can do is just use a glue stick, and wherever that pattern's coming up, and I don't have one right here, but let's just say this pattern was coming up here. What I could do is just put a little bit of that on there and put that pattern down. It only happens when you're cutting and when they've been done for a while. That's one way of doing it. So I use a glue stick and have it handy. But that's ways to get patterns on your wood.